Welcome back, Life Group family. Here we are already into our April series for Life Groups. We received some really good feedback from the groups for March. So thank you so much for all of the care and all of the information you gave back to us. I know for me, and I know the groups you met with, it was a real blessing. I think the Lord's going to continue to do that as we move through Scripture. So this month for April, what we're going to look at is the message it was John 2, verses 1 through 12. You had titled that message, "They Have No Wine." And for the record, we have no wine either, just in case there was any confusion. But you made
nothing in here. Sorry.
It's perfect, right? It's perfect. You shouldn't either. So what in the first part of the message, your first point, you gave a point of emphasis, and it said in the notes, Jesus has an unfolding plan to put his glory on display. So before we get into the clip itself, could you just share a little bit with us on kind of where we're moving when we're looking at that?
Yeah, sure. So again, this is John chapter 2. This is the first miracle of Jesus. It's his first public miracle, first display of his glory. And so, just a little context background before we get to this specific clip. And when I go over it in the clip, I'll give some of this as well. But Jesus and Mary are at a wedding party, and they run out of wine. And Mary says, "I think I know somebody who can handle this." And so she goes to Jesus and says, "Hey, Jesus, they have no wine." And Jesus makes the statement or asks the question to Mary, and he says, "What does this have to do with me?" And so the point that we're going to bring out here is that I think behind the question that Jesus had for Mary is really, he's making a point. He's really saying, look, this is not why I'm here. I didn't come, I wasn't sent on a mission to turn water into wine. I wasn't sent on a mission to deal with temporary earthly issues. I came to deal with eternal realities and eternal issues. And so that's kind of the whole point of this section, that the purpose of God in sending Christ, the purpose of the Father in sending Christ, was to put his glory on display. And what better way in which to put his glory on display than through the work of the cross, through the gospel. And so that's the heart of it. That's what we're going to unpack. And I just pray that it's a blessing to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've said this many times before, that our responsibility, our goal in life as a Christian is to give glory to God. And I think that just plays off of ultimately what you just said of what Jesus is doing here. So as you watch this clip, that's the framework that we're looking at, is how does ultimately glory go to God? Obviously, Jesus gives it here, but then for you and I in our lives and everything that we do. So enjoy the clip, and we'll be right back when you finish.
And the first point could have been this: God has an unfolding plan to put his glory on display. That's the first thought here this morning. God has an unfolding plan to put his glory on display. Look back at the text, John 2. It says, on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was invited with his disciples. The wine ran out. They have no wine. His mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." Then look at the verse after, or the last verse of this section. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and he manifested his glory. So let's unpack what's happening here. Mary approaches Jesus with a problem of earthly significance, a problem for the family of the groom. In that culture, the groom's family was responsible for the week-long wedding celebration. Nowadays, who's responsible to pay for the wedding? The bride. And all of you parents who have just girls, don't you wish that this tradition was still around, that it was just the groom family? The groom's family had to pay for everything. In Jesus' day, right, it was the bride's. It was the groom's family. In our day, it's the bride's family has to pay. And so this would have been a big deal. It wasn't just like in our day where we have one day where we gather for a wedding. Aren't you glad? I guess, kind of been a lot of money to be spent. This was a week-long celebration. This is planned months, if not years in advance. There was arranged marriages that would take place. This is planned a long time in advance. Preparations were made for a week-long celebration culminating in the wedding on the final day. And so you should not run out of anything. You ever run out of something and you've got 2 or 3 days to prepare? Yeah, but they had a lot longer than 1 week. They had many months before to prepare, to store up the food and the wine and the refreshments and all the details that were necessary for the wedding. Who likes to plan weddings? Oh, that's torture, is it not? I mean, my wedding was not torture. I'm glad I didn't have a big part in the planning. I just had to show up and kiss my wife and ride off to New Orleans and then to Tennessee, right? I'm glad that was my part to play. But planning a wedding, you don't miss the details, especially if you have time, right? But they ran out of wine. This would have been a terrible thing to take place. And in that culture, there would have been a stigma that would have been placed on the family of the groom. You know what would have happened too was not only was it the groom's family's responsibility to take care of all the provisions and the food and the refreshments and the wine, but it would have fallen on the groom as well. And so the father of the bride could have looked at the groom and said, I don't know if this guy can take care of you. I don't know if he's the one for you, right? We get to the wedding feast and he runs out of wine. He runs out of provisions. Is he really the one that can take care of you? It would have been something that could have even potentially reached to the point where there could have to have been restitution that would have had to have taken place. That's how significant weddings were. That's how significant the celebration was. And so Mary comes to Jesus and she walks up to her son and she says, hey, they have no wine. They've ran out. Why would Mary come to Jesus when they ran out of wine? Some people would say, well, it's because he raised a dead chicken one day and he turned milk into some other beverage, or he did some little small miracles. We have no account of that. That's just made up. That's just people making up stuff. It says here that this was the first sign that Jesus performed. She didn't come to Jesus because she saw him doing a bunch of little mini miracles. Oh, well, hey, he raised a dead chicken one day, so I'm going to get him to come and I think he can do something. You know why I think? We don't necessarily see it in the text as to why she came to Jesus, but we know she came to Jesus because she believed he could do something. Why? Jesus would have been the smartest. He would have been the most intelligent, the most resourceful, amazing man in her life, period. He would never lie. He would never cheat. He would never steal. He solved all the problems. If there was a problem, he was the best problem solver. Why? Because he was God in the flesh. He would have been the wisest and most competent person in Mary's life. She would have seen that over and over and over again, always obedient, always following through, always fixing issues and problems that would have risen up. And so she knew, and then she also, if you remember, when Jesus was born, she treasured in her heart deeply the reality of who he was. And so she knew, certainly, if anyone's going to be able to fix something, it's going to be Jesus. And so what is Jesus' response to his mother's comment to him about the problem of the groom's family? What did Jesus say to his mom? Listen, he said, look, woman, what does that have to do with me? If I had talked to my mom like that, my mom is here this morning, what if I had talked to you about like that? You would have been like, don't you talk to me like that. That's what we think whenever we read this. Because we think of the word woman. I would never address my mom as woman. But that word woman right here, was Jesus being disrespectful? Well, that word woman here is translated out to be the type of word that would be used when we say the word ma'am. So Jesus did not address his mom like I would address my mom, and I would say, mommy dearest. Mom who I love so great, so much. He gave a formal acknowledgement of his mom. It went from a term of endearment, mother, mom, to ma'am. So he really kind of said something like this. He said, ma'am, what does that have to do with me? What's going on there? Why is Jesus separating right now? Why is he making this distinction about his mom? It's because he's beginning a separation between, he's beginning to separate and to begin the start of him switching his allegiance from his mom to the reason why he came, to the eternal purposes of God. You see this in Matthew chapter 12. Listen to this, Matthew 12. While he was still speaking of Jesus to the people, behold, his mother and his brothers stood outside asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Jesus was not, in Matthew 12, not rejecting his earthly family. He wasn't saying that these are not literally my mother's or my mother or my brother or my family. What he's doing is he is separating, he's emphasizing the eternality of spiritual relationships. And in a similar way here in John 2, Jesus is shifting the focus from this temporary earthly reality of his existence and his allegiance to his mom. He's basically letting her know, hey, ma'am, it's shifting right now. Something's changing right now. My allegiance is now to my Father. And notice what he says here. He says, ma'am, mom, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. What does he point to right there? That word hour, it signifies the reality of the hour of his suffering. He's shifting in this conversation with his mom. His mom is coming to him with a temporary earthly problem. A wedding feast ran out of wine. They didn't make right preparations. Jesus, can you fix it? And Jesus says, ma'am, there's a greater reality here. There's a greater purpose that I'm here for. And I am shifting. I am changing. I am turning. In essence, Jesus is saying, he's saying this: I haven't come to simply fix temporary earthly problems. I am here to deal with eternal realities. This is the shift you see that takes place in Jesus' life, what you see in the Gospels. Now he begins to shift to focus on eternal realities, the hour that was to come. The hour of his suffering, of his crucifixion, of dealing with eternal realities. Mary is coming and saying, hey, Jesus, they ran out of wine. I think you can do something. And he says, ma'am, this is not why I'm here. My hour has not yet come. There is an hour that is coming, and there's a shifting of a focus. You know, I think we often relate to God like this. We have a tendency to reduce Christianity down to a means of securing earthly realities instead of securing our eternal reality. We tend to be like Mary, where we come to Jesus and we say, hey, we've run out of wine. We've run out of our resources. Can you fix it? Anybody in here ever seen the movie Wreck-It Ralph? You can talk to me. If you have kids, you've seen Wreck-It Ralph. It's a Disney movie. Okay, Ralph, it's a cartoon. And Ralph is Wreck-It Ralph. It's a movie based upon a make-believe video game. And the movie's all about the characters inside the video game. You get to see their life inside the video game. And the premise of Wreck-It Ralph in the video game is that Ralph wrecks everything. And he goes around with his fists and he pounds on stuff in the video game, and he breaks windows and he breaks doors and he wrecks it and he wrecks it and he wrecks it. And then there's another character. Anybody know who the character is that comes and fixes it? Fix-It Felix shows up. And what does Felix do? He has this golden hammer, this magical hammer, and he comes and he fixes everything that Ralph wrecks. He fixes and he bangs everything that Ralph wrecks, and he makes it like it never happened. And my contention here this morning is that sometimes we reduce Jesus down to a fix-it Felix. Christ becomes a fix-it Felix when we reduce him down to just a solution to all of our temporary problems. We might say things like this: here, God, I messed this up right here. Can you come in with your little golden hammer and can you fix it? Can you get me out of this jam? Or over here, God, I would really like it if I didn't have to walk through this trial. Can you really remove me from this difficulty, this suffering, this pain? Fix it, Felix. Can you come and help me out here? We're running around living in the effects of sin and brokenness, thinking that all we really need is just someone like Fix It Felix to fix our earthly problems, and then everything will be okay. What does Jesus tell Mary? He says, Mom, I'm not here to solve this family's problem of running out of refreshments. This is not why I came. And sometimes this is what we think Christianity is all about. That Christianity is about Jesus making sure your life is pain-free and that you don't run out of wine, you don't run out of your provision, that this is what he's here for. And Jesus is looking at Mary and he's saying, ma'am, what does this have to do with me? I did not come for this just to turn water into wine. I didn't come just to heal people. I didn't come just to do miracles so people can look at a miracle worker. I came for an hour that is not yet here, but it's coming. And often we look at Jesus in Christianity and we think he's like Fix It Felix. We live under the effects of a broken world where Ralph, who represents sin and destruction and pain and suffering, he's going around wrecking everything in our life, our marriages, our finances, our situations, everything. And we say, Fix It Felix, come and fix it all. And Jesus says, no, this is not why I came. What is amazing about Jesus is, it was interesting. I was talking to my wife as we were going through this a little bit with her. He did fix the temporary problem, didn't he? Isn't that amazing? What's amazing about Jesus is that he did solve this family's problem of running out of wine. Why is that? I believe it's this. The eternal purposes of God and the compassion of God come together in the life of Christ. There was an eternal purpose of God that was at play, and this is what Jesus was trying to get Mary to understand. What does this have to do with me? This is not my problem. They didn't plan correctly. This is not why I came to fix temporary problems. I came for eternal problems. But the eternal purposes of God and the compassion of God come together in the person of Christ. And then he reaches out and he turns water into wine and provides for that family. Isn't that the beautiful picture of who our God is? He has an eternal purpose, but he's full of compassion and he meets us right where we are. And he does come and meet our needs and provide and take care of us. But may we never reduce Christianity down to a Fix-It Felix religion where we tell people, this is what Christianity is all about. Hey, you want out of your problems? You want out of your suffering? You want to have more finances? You want to have better health? Hey, come read about Christ. Come and receive Christ. He will fix all of your problems. So what is the basic lie that we are tempted to believe about this life? Here's the basic lie. If my life is free from trials or difficulties or wine that runs out, then I will have peace and joy. That's the basic lie that we believe. That's why we are susceptible to a false gospel concerning Christ, is that we believe, the lie that we believe is that if this life is free from trials and difficulties or wine that runs out, if we're free from the effects of sin and pain, then I will really have peace and joy. And Jesus is coming in this situation, this first sign that he is revealing to all the people that are there. He's demonstrating and showing, hey, I am God. I am God. I have greater things at play here than just turning water to wine. There's more at stake here. And this is what I would believe would be the first point of this sermon that Jesus could have preached after he turned this water into wine, that there is an eternal plan that God is at work fulfilling here in this story, but in our lives. And the purpose of that plan is to put his glory on display so that people would see Christ for who he is. They'd see Christ in the gospel for what it accomplished. That it wasn't a securing of a fixing of temporary things, but it was a securing of an eternal reality for all those who would place their faith in the finished work of the cross. Do you believe that today?
We hope you enjoyed the clip. As always, we're praying that your discussion time is going to be just a real blessing with one another. I know just watching it over and over as we go week by week, it is just a blessing to dive back into God's word, to take greater emphasis on what we learned on those Sunday messages. So any last thoughts for the groups as we close out?
Yeah, I just want to encourage you, as we did last month, just enjoy the discussion with your groups. And I know when I sat with the group, that I sat through twice with different groups, and it just was encouraging just to hear the different perspectives and feedback. Just want to remind you that, what you think and what you say matters. And so don't ever feel like that you have nothing valuable to add to a conversation. Just share what's on your heart. There are no bad questions, wrong questions.
No bad questions.
No bad questions. No. I guess there could be.
Yeah.
But
we wouldn't know about it if they
exactly. Did. And your group leader is not going to tell you that.
Right.
But just enjoy the conversation, share your heart, and I pray that you're able to mutually encourage one another.
All right. Love y'all. See you next month.